I told you they're real!
Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, released October 3rd, 2000, is an interesting film in the canon of the Scooby franchise. It was the last production of the 20th century, and the final film to be produced and completed using actual film elements and hand-painted cells before things went entirely digital a year later. I've said many a time that I would not be covering any of these four, as other YouTubers like 47 Cartoon Guy and so many more have done amazing retrospectives on these that you can go and watch now and uncover the depths of how they were created better than I could ever showcase. I have wanted to partake in a little fun with this one though, just a little taste. It was a film of changing times, full of transitionary moments, and also very much of its time when it came to its subject matter. The subject of aliens was quickly becoming more mainstream in pop culture as the end of the 20th century came, the time when this film was of course in production. A few decades prior, Roswell, New Mexico became infamous in America in 1947 after the flying saucer incident. While the UFO that made headlines was dubbed to simply be a weather balloon, it would forever create conspiracy theories about a government cover-up of aliens amidst Cold War anxieties. In the late 1980s, Area 51, the very highly secretive US Air Force facility, became popular public knowledge after claims made by conspiracy theorist Bob Lazar, a man who claimed he used to work there as part of a classified American government project, believing he worked on a flying saucer from outer space during his time. The fascination with his story has lasted, many people to this day associating the Area 51 base with aliens more than ever, despite it being heavily debunked, leading to countless conspiracy theories about the American government hiding aliens from the public in particular. 1995 saw the infamous alien autopsy hoax, supposedly showing footage of an autopsy of a body recovered from that 1947 Roswell crash, which became highly influential on pop culture as well, despite being debunked. All of this, combined with intensifying distrust in the government for decades with so many actual scandals and cover-ups, would of course quickly start to influence the media audiences would consume as a result. In 1996, the film Independence Day would feature the world almost coming to an end because of aliens, with the American government as the focus. A year later, the film Men in Black was also a massive success, a franchise about government agents covering up the existence of alien life forms from the American public. You'll find many references and tropes from that film in particular in Alien Invaders. What perhaps fueled the pop culture fascination more than anything was the gigantic television series The X-Files, which ran from 1993 until 2002. The series focused on American government agents Fox Mulder and Dana Scully uncovering the actions of aliens on a weekly basis, often with the government making sure to shut them up if they got too close, and frequently referencing many of the conspiracy theories and other real-life events surrounding aliens in the public zeitgeist. For example, SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, was a real name for various people searching for alien life, typically with scientific methods to back it up, which was referenced in the first episode of the second season of the show. SETI would also inspire Alien Invaders, as SAF, Search for Alien Life Forms, is a direct reference to this in the film. The X-Files had even more outright influence on Alien Invaders, as 2 of the 3 trailers promoting the film would parody the famous and iconic theme song of the TV series.
You will notice an eerie greenish glow. Your heart will beat faster. Your palms start to sweat. Suddenly, you know they are among us. It's the all-new movie, Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, coming fall 2000. It's just the beginning.
The film being set in the desert is very purposeful, as it's clearly meant to be in the same vicinity as places like Roswell or Area 51's real-life desert setting, populated in the film with plenty of scary government agents and research going on, at least supposedly, exactly in the way the public envisioned from the conspiracy theories surrounding the base. As far as the public was concerned, the government knew aliens were real and were hiding it, or they believed it wasn't true, but that it was still a fun idea for a good story. Alien Invaders does everything it can to hit every particular alien story beat that had been popular up to the end of the 90s by this point, and it really just made sense for Scooby-Doo to tackle the subject, as aliens had already been villains for the franchise multiple times. Spooky Space Kook is the most classic notable alien, an episode taking a cue from the still recent moon landing. I have a video on that one, so if Scooby was already in the middle of a modern reboot of the franchise, 2 films in, aliens with their current popularity seems like the obvious next place to take the dog detective from the outside, and with the focus on the monsters being real in this series of 4 films, Alien Invaders is even able to play both sides, the scary aliens being a fake conspiracy, but real aliens still existing despite what the government says, and also not having ill intentions, which is what many people believed about real aliens existing. Both arguments, be it mere conspiracies or truth either way, are able to be represented here. The character Lester also heavily plays into this major factor of the film's influence from the current pop culture of the time. Very loudly, Lester is a conspiracy theorist, not unlike someone such as Bob Lazar, who claims to have been abducted by aliens, the same way many people have come out with identical stories in real life about their supposed abductions. For example, example, Barney and Betty Hill were a couple that claimed to be abducted by aliens in 1961, taken aboard a spaceship such as Lester. Their story featured many hallmarks featured in Alien Invaders and other pop culture, from hypnosis-induced memories to missing time. Many of these real-life people have then gone on to be obsessed with aliens, spending all of their time telling their story and trying to get people to believe them, which is utilized with Lester, who obsessively spends his time painting his encounters to visualize what he believes he experienced, much how real-life abductees often do in expressing their experience through art. The year 2000 was basically just the perfect time for Scooby-Doo to find himself face-to-face once again with the updated culture's view of aliens, and the film made sure it took advantage of this. The team behind this first era of direct-to-video films, led by Davis Doy alongside the likes of Jen Stenstrom, Glenn Leopold, Lance Falk, and others, had just come off the first two at Warner Brothers, Zombie Island and Witch's Ghost. Long story short, after Zombie Island was such a huge and unexpected success, more than the higher-ups had ever expected, Witch's Ghost saw a lot of intense studio meddling, forcing two prestigious live-action writers onto the film instead. This had forced the team to have to go back and try to rewrite everything to save the project, adding the last act of the movie entirely themselves, and giving us the final product we know and love now. Alien Invaders here, however, saw a much better and less stressful experience. The team was left alone to make the movie they wanted this time with barely any executive meddling, with many such as Lance Falk recalling it with only happy memories, free to make a Scooby story they felt was a worthy follow-up to the prior two. Tragically, this film would be Mary Kay Bergman's final performance as Daphne after taking over in Zombie Island.
Is this the first time that Scooby-Doo and the gang has met up with aliens? Yes, as far as I know. And it's really kind of an interesting situation because Scooby and Shaggy actually fall in love. And who they fall in love with is a secret.
And who was that girl?
Heather North was the original voice of Daphne, and she created this wonderful character. And what I'm trying to do is to make it live, now for the 90s.
The film would go on to be dedicated to her memory, having been released posthumously. The following film, Cyber Chase, wasn't so lucky about its production, having a contract writer, Mark Turos, forced onto the team again that turned the production into a train wreck because of how much of a mess the script was. The team asked to write the scripts themselves again, like Alien Invaders, but when they instead got more scripts for new films from Mark Turos, the outline was even worse this time, not even having a mystery to solve yet, and the situations that just would be too difficult to animate because he was a live-action writer, not accounting for these things having to be drawn by someone frame by frame on a time and budget limit. When they kept trying to fight back and insist his scripts just weren't good or workable, the higher-ups ultimately replaced Davis Doy and his team with a new team that would just get the projects done as they were, which is why we never got a fifth film in this initial series from the Zombie Island team, and why the DTV movies were rebooted with a different style. One of those rejected scripts Mark Turos wrote, a concept featuring a rock concert, would eventually become the next film, Legend of the Vampire, with some tweaking by the new team. Monster of Mexico following it was also a script from another writer that the first team rejected, with Turos additionally writing the next film, Loch Ness Monster, not long after, all of which I have covered before, and might account for their many inconsistencies. Speaking of covering movies, with this tetralogy being perhaps the biggest ask for the channel, while I still decline permanently ever touching Zombie Island and Witch's Ghost directly, for real go watch 47 Cartoon Guy for really nice coverage of them, I will take back one little thing, throw one little bone, and gloss over Alien Invaders like usual. This is the only bone though. The movie fittingly opens up in space, and the music score notably is largely reminiscent of music score from the space set series Star Trek, immediately kicking us off with a pop culture reference or callback. A trio, Max, Steve, and Laura, suddenly receive a signal through their monitors, a reference to the WOW signal, a narrowband radio signal heard in 1977 that is considered the strongest candidate for evidence of an alien radio transmission. So again, the film right from the jump is pulling from what the public recognize as evidence of conspiracy for aliens in real life by now. Steve also is voiced by Mark Hamill, who's been all over the franchise since appearing in the Genie crossover in 1973, but also voiced Snakebite Scruggs in Zombie Island. The three hope they might have reached someone out there today, that maybe they're even here already, as their monitor seems to detect something. On the road, we have a rare occasion of the boys driving the van while the others are resting in the back, and things start to feel eerie as they drive into a dust storm. Unfortunately, because of the storm, they miss the sign warning them not to trespass on government property, and suddenly bright lights and a loud sound turn into a giant UFO above the van. They then crash into a cactus and get out to look around, but find nothing, and the radiator has overheated in all the commotion. They see the lights of a town about a mile away though.
You want us to walk across the desert at night?
Well, I'm not gonna carry you.
The boys stay behind in protest while the trio head off, the Scooby Snacks stash immediately getting raided. But only one is left, which rolls off. Before they can retrieve it, a jackalope comes along, which was one of the contributions Glenn Leopold made to receive story credit on this film, and make up for his lost residuals on Witch's Ghost for heavily rewriting and saving it. The boys chase it over a fence line where they see a cave emanating light, but then...
Like, there's something creepy behind us, isn't there?
We get this iconic shot of the alien Invaders, and a chase scene happens with a cover of the series theme song sung by Jennifer Love Hewitt.
I was very excited.
Scooby-Doo, where are you?
The aliens end up chasing the boys the entire way down to where the other three are, telling them in the middle of a diner about the aliens they saw, although Fred finds nothing.
Are those glazed?
One thing I miss about cell animation, I love that you can see the cell cutting off here for the counter. It feels like real humans touched and made this and not a computer. Dottie, a waitress voiced by Jennifer Hale, who had voiced Thorn in Witch's Ghost just before this, says she's heard the funny noises and seen the strange lights at night around here, and points to a man she says was taken aboard.
Them aliens are here to take over the world!
The gang learned that this man, Lester, believes the aliens abducted and experimented on him, and that a month ago, cattle vanished without a trace in the area, much like in real alien stories, leading to a lot of people vacating the town. Thelma takes the others to talk to Lester for more, who says the aliens looked just as the boys described, where we then see what he recalls happened to him, which is, again, very inspired by real supposed abduction stories. The aliens asked who he was and what he had seen that night, while the next part is redacted, perhaps too unfriendly for kids, leaving Lester to wake up outside his home the next morning. He confirms he has proof by way of pictures for Fred, and agrees to take Velma and the others to see. Entering his home, it's entirely full of alien artifacts, showing his deep obsession, much like many others who believe themselves to have been abducted.
What, they think I'm some kind of nut?
Lester finally unveils his pictures, revealing them to actually be painted portraits he's made, which do show what he believes he saw visually, but aren't exactly the proof the gang was hoping for. Daphne then finds one that looks exactly like what they saw earlier, and she asks what the other things are. Lester explains they're SAF dishes put up a year ago, search for alien life forms being a group sending and monitoring communication to and from space in hopes of discovering intelligent life. Apparently, it's been ever since the dishes were put up that the aliens started appearing.
Why?
To take over the world!
With there being no hotel, Lester offers the girls to sleep in the room his kids used before they moved out, and the couch for Fred, leaving the rooftop for the boys with a scenic view. Unfortunately, the aliens also have a good view, and as everyone inside gets some nice rest, the UFO airship hovers on over, casting its light upon the boys and sending Hooks to retrieve them, then flying off. When Scooby awakes, he finds himself and Shaggy strapped to a table by the aliens. One alien, voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, who also voices Max, tells them they won't be harmed if they cooperate, but Scooby's able to break free and runs around a few times. With a pretty menacing weapon, the boys faint, and when their eyes open again, they're presented with a much nicer sight. As they set their eyes upon a beautiful hippie girl and her dog, it's love at first sight, and they shake off their creepy encounter. These two, Crystal and her dog Amber, both voiced by the incredible Candy Milo, are here to capture photography of wildlife, to which Shaggy mentions the jackalope sighting. Hearing the boys' names, Crystal says they're groovy, which rings even better for Shaggy. The two hop in with the girls to show off where they saw the jackalope, as well as the aliens. A lot of gear Crystal says is for her photography still in the back as Amber evades Scooby's advances. Crystal, though, isn't put off by Shaggy eating a dog biscuit himself. This isn't the first time Shaggy has had a love interest, of course, as he had a whole girlfriend in Reluctant Werewolf, which I have a video on, and unfortunately she's all but forgotten after that single appearance. Interestingly, Googie's voice actor does actually appear in this movie as Velma. BJ Ward took over the role for this tetralogy and other various Scooby media during this time. Meanwhile, the others, along with Lester, return to the diner, unable to think of anywhere else to find the boys. They don't find them, but Fred does get a little flirting action with Dottie, and as they sit down, Velma catches the two girls dropping the lovebirds off. It's clear they've got it bad when they even turn down food, and Shaggy goes into the pretty iconic fantasy musical number How Groovy.
It will be a dream come true. She's even got a doggy for Scooby-Doo. How groovy, just us two, so groovy. Don't forget Scooby-Doo.
I love this one part here where we revert back to the classic art style and costumes especially.
I'm chasing ghosts. I'll quit in time for dinner, 6 o'clock at the most. How groovy.
They even start fantasizing about the kids. Like, dude, maybe have the first date before we go that far. And we can't go without Scooby and Shaggy kissing for the 999th time. Finally, the boys tell the others they found the girls in the desert after being abducted by aliens. While the cook seems suspicious of the gang sticking around still, Freddy still remains suspicious himself meanwhile. You'd think he'd have more faith after seeing real werecats, zombies, and a witch's ghost by now, given that these have continuity. The trio say goodbye to Lester, and the boys come back out of the restroom, freshened up, as Shaggy puts it. They head to the auto repair shop to inquire about their van, but the owner, Buck, seems disinterested and says he'll get to it when he can. Probably the least offensive Native American representation in the franchise to date. A man, Max, pulls up and asks if the van is theirs. They introduce themselves, and Velma is very excited to hear about the work Saf does, getting Max to agree to a tour after Fred helps him load up a ridiculous amount of oil he says is for the dishes. The girls show up though, so the boys head off for their plans with them as the trio go with Max, Buck watching them drive off. As Shaggy tells Crystal about the witch's ghost, they make it to where they saw the jackalope, and Scooby finally impresses Amber. They head to the fence they crossed the night before, and both girls convince the boys over with some puppy dog eyes. The gang trio hang out with the Saf trio, who all seem bored out of their minds with their work. They mention to the team that the locals think the dishes are drawing aliens, but the Saf trio say they forget to lock up their livestock and blame it on them, and that the government already investigated it. Apparently the fence Shaggy and Scooby crossed was put up by the government, in fact, though Saf don't know what they're doing. As they laugh about it, Velma notices the curious mud all over their shoes for bored people who never leave the building. Laura also asks where their other friend and his dog are, despite not meeting them yet. Speaking of, the guys and girls found no jackalope, but Crystal still got plenty of beautiful photos. Some scary military police officers suddenly show up, one grabbing Crystal's camera and opening it up in confusion with how complicated it is. And when the MPs send them packing because they're looking into alien abductions, they say they wish they could actually bust them. Crystal stops the boys when the coast is clear, confessing that she's not really a photographer, but actually a government agent sent to investigate alien sightings. When this changes nothing for the boys, it makes Crystal all the happier to embrace Shaggy. Lester shows up as Max sees the trio out, and they catch a ride up to where the boys are. Velma brings up how odd the mud was considering this is a desert and they're always inside over at Saf. Not to mention the oil Max got is the wrong kind for the dishes. The Saf trio pick up on the suspicions and call this in. Meanwhile, the boys take Crystal to the cave where they first saw the aliens, but before they can find more, they hear the MPs. On the way, the others drive past Buck and ask if he's looked at the van, but he says he'll get to it later, and I love Daphne's reaction here. Velma is deaf sus of him though. Back in the cave, Scooby's tail combined with Shaggy's ventriloquism is able to throw off the MPs, but a real snake throws a wrench at things as they run off. As Lester drives away, Fred points out the green paint on his hands, though Daphne reminds him he's a painter. Velma takes them over to the gorge, suspecting a river where the mud could have originated. Everything's starting to heat up. Shaggy confirms the sight of the same glow from that night, which Crystal follows, gasping at what they find. Having made it down, the trio find no trace of water, but do find some tracks to follow, where they find piles of wet rock that lead to more tracks headed into a cave. They find it to be a mine cave, and discover one of those oil cans from earlier, and then tons of mining equipment, not to mention gold! There's nothing but gold for the eyes to see, which someone is in the middle of mining already. Sorry to the boys, but even more because the alien invaders are back, and Shaggy's right to wonder what they would want with gold. But there's a chase scene to do, so there's no time to think about that. The trio end up chased away by one of the aliens as well, leaving Shaggy's group almost falling off a ledge, and the trio being the ones caught in a net for once. The MPs finish the job, backing Shaggy and the others off the crumbling cliff. They're sent by the aliens to make sure this is taken care of, while Daphne shouts at their captors who threaten them. Velma, however, calls Steve out by name, and he unmasks himself, another rarity in this flopped situation. The trio ask how Saf could do this, and they simply refer to the gold, to which Velma says they should be doing their job. Max explains he was, though, when he found the cave, and the three losers being bored out of their minds went down to check, finding a treasure trove. They picked up where the miners left off and had given up, and mined in secret without reporting the discovery that's technically on government property. They hired friends to be the fake MPs, and have been mining in shifts. Shaggy, Crystal, and the canines get themselves up just to find themselves at another ledge meanwhile, with a severely gnarly fall waiting. Saf continued to flip the narrative norm by explaining further. The aliens were to scare people off, the noises of their mining just made sense with the gimmick, and they dressed up a helicopter to look like a UFO from the ground. They even have a whole interior for when they abduct people, like Lester or the boys. As they prepare to do away with the trio, the others find themselves cornered by the fake MPs, leading the boys to try and be brave for their girls. But as the fake MPs aren't afraid, we get one of the most iconic twists of Scooby-Doo, as Crystal and Amber activate their necklaces and reveal their true forms, scaring the men off and transforming back in time for the boys not to see. They hear Daphne scream and head in that direction, but as the trio get lowered, the fake MPs run in shouting about what they saw, leaving Fred an opening. Crystal and Amber show up with the boys, the grown men acting scared of very obviously harmless hippies, so they're forced to face off again. Fred wiggles out and starts pulling the girls over as everyone is distracted, and as the MPs grab the boys, Crystal and Amber transform again, scaring them, but also scaring Shaggy and Scooby. However, Steve points out capturing real aliens would make them more than gold, so they get moving. The girls trap the fake MPs and Max, but Steve and Laura begin their chase and Crystal falls, Amber having to try and hold off the two before they kill her. As Laura leaves to help their colleagues, the others point out to Shaggy and Scooby that the aliens are the girls, and they finally recognize them. Laura warns Steve as the boys heroically charge toward him, throwing him across the mine. Fred gets his mojo back as he traps Steve and Laura, and the girls transform back as Shaggy makes sure Crystal is okay. She makes her confession that she is actually a government agent, but from she and Amber's world, sent to investigate signals from this one. Even Amber gets in on pointing out the signals were from the dishes.
Dig that, Scoob! A talking dog! Real?
Imagine that.
The first signal they got was from a TV broadcast in the 60s, which is why they're dressed so retro and talk like Shaggy, thinking this was still the norm. Right on time, a light shines down to take them home, a real UFO now above them. Crystal asks for forgiveness and is granted it, then asks Shaggy to always think of her as a friend. Friend-zoned by an alien. Ouch. But she says long-distance relationships never work out. T. Fred starts breaking down in tears, and this is probably the reaction of every person who grew up with this. Amber has a goodbye with Scooby as well, giving him a real kiss, and even Shaggy gets a proper kiss from Crystal to remember her by. The two step into the light and take their true forms, smiling as they depart, and the ship takes off. Later, Steve is unable to finish the meddling kids line as they're taken away, and real government agents clean up. Lester promises pictures of actual aliens, leading them away as the gang laugh to themselves. The Saf trio hope this means proof for them to get a book deal before they're locked up, likely not getting out of this anytime soon. Luck is in for the gang thankfully, as Buck shows up with the van fixed enough for the gang to get to the city to repair it properly. Fred inquires about what he was doing before. As it turns out, he collects pressed flowers. He doesn't want it to change his tough guy image around here. The gang take a sad turn as they see the boys looking up to the sky longingly, with this probably being one of the more somber endings of a Scooby movie, tailor-made to leave an impact. Velma does offer one last box of Scooby snacks they missed, which at least helps for now, to her relief. They drive off back onto the desert road, the jackalope popping out to take a look at the sky above. Don't skip the credits! Scoob has one last scare just for us. And that is Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, in all its glory. Honestly, I never understood people rating it lower than the first two, or speaking of it as lesser somehow. As a kid, I always loved and watched this one just as much as those two. One thing you can't deny is that the Japanese anime studio Mook Animation did an equally amazing job with the visual production of the film, visually feeling just as lush as those first two they did, and representing a beautiful ending to the franchise's life in hand-painted cell animation shot on film. I know often that a complaint of the film can be disappointment that the alien invaders were fake, back to the classic bad guys in masks routine. However, much as the team working on the film have expressed, I think that's some of the genius of the film. Because Zombie Island and Witch's Ghost prime you for monsters being real now, you assume they have to be. So when it turns out they're pretty obvious fakes, but that the twist is actually that there are not only real aliens, but that it's Crystal and Amber, it's all the more shocking and memorable. It's going against the expectations you have now, subverting things to keep it fresh. Exactly what Cyber Chase and the following scripts were not doing. And when it comes to that, I know that everyone remembers Crystal and Amber. If anyone's fond of something from this movie, it's those two. With us getting a miserable Zombie Island quasi-sequel I've talked about before, and the Hex Girls returning after Witch's Ghost, I am surprised Crystal and Amber have never made a return. I feel like people would love that, more than any other relationship Shaggy's dealt with since. The How Groovy musical sequence in particular is so iconic. I know people adore that piece of the film. Mary Kay Bergman also is wonderful as ever, and it's sad this was her final time voicing Daphne.
Well, the gang does help solve the mystery, of course. I mean, that's our job.
The atmosphere does a good job capturing New Mexico if we are to assume that's where it takes place. And as we've covered, really does try to get in all the added pop culture love about aliens that have entered the public zeitgeist and fascination since the last time Scooby crossed one. Maybe Steve, Max, and Laura are boring or disappointing, definitely obvious, but I think they also still fit with what the movie is presenting. People can say what they want about Alien Invaders, but I think it's fairly underrated, even among this tetralogy tetralogy that's usually raised up so high. It's always been just as memorable and iconic to me as the other three, with so many memories I'll never get tired of, and this being considered better than Cyberchase but not as good as the first two, leaving it to usually not getting discussed as often as the other three, is plenty reason for it to end up as the only one I break and actually talk about. Even better to do it now that it's finally on Blu-ray, with a transfer utilizing the original film elements instead of the crusty old DVD transfer. Even if you don't love this one as deeply as those first two iconic DTV movies, I hope you don't count it out. That's about all I really have to say this time though. I have videos on plenty of the other Scooby DTV movies though, including the two immediately after this tetralogy that used those rejected scripts, so check those out if you want, or anything else that tickles your fancy. Bye!
He's a little tensed.